This is a picture of Brunswick after 2017 Hurricane Matthew. You can see that water has been pushed onto shore, and we're going to talk a lot about the reasons why this happens and why it's happening more frequently. But I think as a new faculty member, I would be remiss if I didn't talk at least a little bit about sea level rise. So I think it's a good thing to have you think about as you start to travel for spring break, whether you go home or whether you go to the beach. You start to think about, oh, well, how is this community going to be impacted by this? Or throw a whole bunch of graphs and figures at you. This one is really simple to understand. This is billion-dollar weather and climate events, and this is specifically here in Georgia. And you can see in the 80s, we have very few of these, whereas you move closer to 2023, a couple years ago, we're starting to see an exponential rise in these really expensive events that are caused by weather and climate. You can think about things like California, with the recent events in California. That would be an example of this too. So this is Georgia specifically, but if you take a higher level look on the United States, you'll see the same kind of trend. So this is probably the most important figure that you'll see on this presentation. And Tybee on Fort Pulaski in the 1935, they put a sea level rise gauge on the fort. And for the past 85 years, this tide gauge has remained, and it's been a great tool to see how sea level has changed in this area. So specifically in Tybee or around Tybee, sea level rise has gone up around 10 to 11 inches. And that may not seem like a lot, but I'm going to convince you by the end of this presentation that that is a lot. And we're expecting to see that quadruple by the end of in the next 50 years. So just throwing that out there. Okay, so bear with me here. In 1950, the entire coast of Georgia flooded one time every 2 to 3 years. That's the entire coast, right? Just last year in Savannah, the city flooded 42 times. And many of those times of flooding were what we call sunny day flooding, which is shown here in this picture. Sunny day flooding is during high tide events where water is being pushed onto land where there's no storm action associated with that. This is in Miami where this happens all the time. This is just an event that they have to deal with. So thinking about sea level rise has always been happening. But then now we have structures that we want to keep along the ocean. And we're actually exponentially causing this to happen at a faster rate, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is something that we have to really think about, especially for our coastal communities. So why is this important? Well, it is super expensive to deal with sea level rise in coastal communities. Just 1 inch of water can cause $25,000 of damage to a home or a business. Crazy. So then how does sea level rise work? There are two components that I need you to know about. One is melting ice. So melting ice from the polar caps melts because of warmer temperatures. Also, when water gets warmer, it expands more. So there's both melting ice, and as water gets warmer, it's expanding. This is pushing water levels higher, and this is what's causing sea level rise. These are different graphs of projected sea level rise in Georgia. There's a bunch of different models that range from low, which are like minimal sea level rise, to extreme, which is like no measures are taken. Let's just watch it go out of control. So on this figure, you can see that by the year 2100, which is just boggles my mind, 2100, that sea level rise could be somewhere between 11 feet and 2 feet. So the Georgia Department of Natural Resources tends to kind of be on this more conservative side, thinking that sea level rise in Georgia is expected to rise between 4 to 6 feet. So somewhere between these intermediate high and intermediate models are really what we're projecting to see in the next 80 years. Another thing that I just told you about, I told you that Savannah flooded 42 times last year. Well, we're expecting to see that happen way more often. So just here, we're in the 2020s. We're seeing this in like the 40 time. Well, you extrapolate this out maybe 70 years, 80 years, and we're starting to see where we're expecting close to 360 days of flooding in certain places, when in the reality is that that's pretty extreme, right? That's insane. So somewhere between 200 and 300 days of flooding per year in coastal Georgia because of sea level rise. So we use models to make decisions and interpret data. And you're going to actually go through this process of doing this, of thinking about like, okay, how does sea level rise impact this one area that I really care about? So what are models in science? They explain behaviors of a system that are complex or can't be observed directly. We can't watch sea level rise happen in the future. We're going to kind of model this out and predict what will happen given certain things that are happening now. We do computational models, so these are really complex. There's a bunch of people that are around my office right here that just do models. They don't really go in the field. They model what they expect to see based on current observations that they're finding and predicted things that are going to happen in the future. So what do you need to know for this course? Scientists collect observational data, things that we can measure right now, current sea level rise, tides, those things we can measure right now. Then they use mathematical models to predict future systems, so future water temperatures based on the melting ice and emission rates. Then they combine the observational data with these computational models to make predictions about these future systems. So, summary, current data that we can see, computational prediction of the system, and that will give us a model that can project these future systems. That's what we're seeing, and we're going to be looking at these specifically around sea level rise. So the first one that you're going to do on your assignment is you're going to use the NOAA, which is a really important federal agency that deals with ocean science. It gives you weather. It also gives you a lot of things around coastal communities like sea level rise. Um, First one you're going to do is you're going to go use NOAA to pick a place that really matters to you. Zoom in and watch what happens with sea level rise. So I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to give you an example, and then you're going to do this for your assignment, your individual assignment. I'm from the Panhandle of Florida. I've told you that before. So this is pretty much home for me, the St. Mark's Lighthouse. And right now, you can see on this left-hand side, this is current mean high water mark. So that's where the highest sea level reaches now. Does not impact this lighthouse at all. But I can start playing with this a little bit and watching the water kind of impact this lighthouse that, means so much to me and my family. And you can see these different scenarios of like when water starts to intrude on this area. It's like, all right, it's around 3 feet of sea level rise. We're starting to see some water, but around 4 and 5, this lighthouse is really impacted. You're going to choose 2 different locations for your assignment based on whatever you're like excited about. It could be places you're going for spring break or places you just really care about. So you're going to do this and kind of explain what this might mean for that. Let me go back to my presentation. Okay. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the Surging Seas Finder. This is a different model platform, and you're going to play around with these different systems. I really want you to kind of explore this site and think about what this means and who would find this data useful. So this is for Georgia, and you can mess with the water levels here. But what I want you to do is I really want you to go down here to these different when are the risk, what is the risk, all these different questions, and kind of mess with the water levels and see like, okay, what is the extreme scenario? How much are we thinking that sea level might rise? That's incredible, but we're thinking more of like a medium or a slow rise, and we're like at 4 feet. But then we can think about what is at risk. If I make this 4 feet, then how much property value in our state is actually impacted? That's interesting for me to know. And then you could also think about total homes. What counties are they in? Are they in Savannah? Are they in Brunswick? Where are these counties? And then you can think about other things like reducing the risk and all the other things here. But you can also look at population, like who is the population that's most vulnerable. You look at the infrastructure, like what roads are most impacted by this. And these are the things that I want you to be able to do for this last part of the assignment.